Good afternoon, everybody from Western Australia, in Australia here. I live just south of Perth. This is my ex-JW testimony. Why I left the organisation, and it's not easy because a lot of it I only left last year. I faded. I wouldn't give the elders the benefit, the satisfaction of basically disfellowshipping me. So I decided to leave after doing extensive research, and of course it's not easy knowing what you believe for a lot of your adult life, and late teens was just a load of nonsense. I still have some belief in a degree of the Bible being true, and I still believe in God, but I noticed many that have left have become atheists and joined the atheist bandwagon. Well, that's up to them, that's their choice, but I don't feel anyone should be bullied because of what they believe. I think the procedures and policies have been really toxic for the organisation, and they cause a lot of harm to people. And so I'm just going to go back to from my childhood and how I got involved with Jehovah's Witnesses, or how my family did, and do the best I can. It won't be easy. Some of the information is quite, it can be heartbreaking, the situation you grow up in, and I know many have experienced worse circumstances than me, being cut off from their whole family, but I'll tell my story the best I can, and what does help is having an outlet to talk to, which I do see a psychologist after nearly a year of waking up, and I think it's best that, and I'll give any advice I could give would be for anybody leaving, it's best to see a therapist, because it isn't easy, it is heartbreaking, it can be, and it really raw. So to begin off, well, first of all, I should be working today, but it's a public holiday, so I've got the day off, and I thought it best to tell my story. I've been trying to put on an air for a long time. For any of those that follow me on Twitter and Facebook, or on Twitter I'm under Tigerland or at Lioness. So for those that want to watch my story, but I first of all want to say that thank you to those that helped me kind of validate the doubts I had, such as John Sheeder's channel, DW Struggle. They kind of helped me realise that this wasn't just some random apostate going on a rant, which I often viewed videos some years ago, and there was no real substance in their argument, but this time it was people actually leaving and being cut off from their family. So this really helped me to realise that how bad this organisation really is. So I have to say that I'll start off my story now. My grandfather became, and grandmother, Jehovah's Witness in their younger years, and they raised my mother and her siblings as Jehovah's Witnesses. But to let you know, my mother never became a baptised witness. So to this day, she still believes, but she doesn't really practice much. She went to the memorial recently, but first time I didn't go in many years. My grandfather too, just to let you know, and as people know, this organisation harbours pedophiles. He was a pedophile, and I won't say too much because for the sake of the victims and the family, that I don't want to expose names or anything. But he was a real piece of work, and I actually lived as a child for a while in the house with him, and that guy was violent, and he also was a self-righteous bastard. And it's true how they use the Bible, pedophiles, basically to control people. And thankfully, I wasn't a victim of any sexual abuse because I was a guy, or a male, as it were, boy, and he only molested females or girls, and it was my mother and her, I could say, the girls and her sisters that were molested by my grandfather. So thankfully none of my own sisters were. Well, they briefly lived in that sometime, the house. I mean, I'll change some details because it's very raw and I don't really want to put this on a public platform. So anyway, I did ask my grandfather when I was 14 because of the situation, my mother living with him briefly with us kids. We were removed from there by the government department welfare system because they realised he was violent towards us physically. So we were taken off our mother. And my brother and I were only in our early teens. We refused to live in that environment. So we ran away. And our aunt and uncle, we lived with them for about nearly a year until we returned to our mother. And I even asked, the ironic thing is my aunt and uncle, one of them, we lived with different ones over a space of the year, allowed us to go back and stay and work with our grandfather for a bit when we weren't supposed to, because that's the reason why we were removed from that in the first place from our mother. And it was very stressful, and it still affects my sisters. We're younger to this day, being removed from their mother. Trying to get the video right. I'm filming from my phone here. First time I've ever did this, so bear with me. Anyway, I said to my grandfather that time while we did a bit of work with him when we weren't supposed to even be with him, why did you molest or rape, I was 14 at the time I asked, why did you molest or rape my aunts and my mother? And he go, well, Lot did it to his daughters in the Bible. And I thought, what kind of a justification is that? Sick mind. And I always stood up to people. You know, I was bullied from a child because of this whole town where I grew up knew about the past of our family. It was embarrassing going to school. So when I got to high school age, I actually went to a school which was further away, a town. I had to get up very early to travel on a bus 5 days a week because of the bullying I would have received if I'd went to where I actually lived, the town where I lived. Anyway, my brother and I, we were a bit of rebels. Well, it's good that we did it. We got sick of working with this idiot of my grandfather, was just using us to work with him in the bush, or forest as we call it. And so we ran away. We stole some money. We caught the bus and we said, up you old bastard. And we took off to the city back to live with our aunt and uncle. And he told my mum, he called and said we were devastated that we'd taken off. And that silly bastard didn't realise the reason why we weren't supposed to even be with him. And he wouldn't let us talk to our mother when he was talking to her. So anyway, that is over and we end up going back. He ends up in prison, sentenced, and we returned. And without saying any more details, we returned to our mother, and anyway, life continues on. So he's out of our life now, and I'm getting up to the stage during high school where we end up having our last name changed for our own protection in a sense, so we weren't acknowledged by any people that have met us from our past. So just backtracking a bit, as my mother was raised as a Jehovah's Witness, we only briefly as children went to a few meetings. We couldn't say we were really raised as children. I mean, my grandfather used to rant on about the Bible and nonsense. And we went to a few brief meetings and we had a Bible study to up about 10, but we rarely went. So I wouldn't say we were raised in the organisation as Jehovah's Witnesses like my mum had been and her siblings. So what happened was we were studying with this couple, this woman, and you'll remember the book, my book of Bible stories. And my brother and I laughed at a particular seen in that. And so this woman that was studying with us refused to study with us anymore. She was offended, and we thought, well, good riddance, who cares? We're only kids, it was boring anyway. So anyway, fast forwarding now to the events that had happened, and now we're in a bigger town or an area, probably around 50,000 people. Now, we're having nothing to do with Jehovah's Witnesses at all, where my brother and I and other siblings, my sisters, we're all mixing with people at school. We make friends and we're doing things with them. And I'm even going to what we call technical college, which is after high school. It's before university. So you can attend that to try and get a trade as a carpenter, or at the time I was doing a course as a mechanical engineer. And then the Jehovah's Witnesses come knocking, and saying that the only other contact I had with Jehovah's Witnesses was when my aunts and uncles, most of them were baptised Jehovah's Witnesses. So on school holidays, I'd visit my cousins and we would she would take us to the meeting. So anyway, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life, so the witnesses come to my door and my mum said, do you want to study? And I said, yeah, sounds all right. So I started having a Bible study with this man, and he wasn't raised a Jehovah's Witness at all himself. Very passionate man, and he became in the truth, as you'd say, in his 30s, and he taught me how to drive, and I got my driver's licence with him. And I remember going down a steep hill and there was a stop sign, and I nearly went through if it weren't for him pulling the handbrake. So that kind of probably what drew me more to the witnesses, their loving, kind nature. Anyway, I got to 18 years old and I moved away. And I went to the city, Perth, of course, in one of the cities. And because obviously I grew up in a small town, which is about 300 kilometres south of Perth, and I called to witness myself and started studying. And this time, unlike the couple I studied with in prior to that, when I first started at 16, regularly, which they were an older couple, these were a very young couple. And they were very nice and good to have a Bible study with and kind of do things with. And I progressed to unbaptised publisher in that congregation. But there was this guy, and my grandmother was going to the meetings regularly, and she lived in that area of my step-grandfather. And he was a far better man than my grandfather, because my grandmother had divorced my grandfather. Anyway, and remarried. I met this guy. He was a Bible study too, older guy, and he was a bit weird. I mean, he even assaulted me once in the house, and he wasn't going to meetings. He stopped going regularly, but I was continuing, and I was even riding my bike. I think it was at the time between 10 and 20 kilometres each way to the meeting. And I was a little bit annoyed because I thought, I'm going out in the ministry, I'm doing what you're supposed to be doing as a publisher, getting your hours and your report. How come they won't let me progress beyond the unbaptised publisher? And they said because I was living with this guy who wasn't progressing, and said, what's that got to do with me? I'm only renting a room there. He's not related to me. And I kind of got stumbled by that. I remember being 19 at the time, 19, 20. Anyway, I was annoyed and I left, and I went down to live in another, say what you could say, smaller city, about 500,000 people, just about an hour drive from Perth, the city. Anyway, this is the actual place where actually progress, became a Jehovah's Witness and so on, baptised. And I kind of went to a congregation, and the one I'd gone to in the city was small, and a lot of the people were nice, and it was more balanced for me. And just saying that, I'll add that at that particular time too, my poor uncle had passed away, died. He was only 29, and that was pretty horrible for me to see. And any family member, mum's youngest brother. And it was the second member I'd lost, because I remember as a child my sister had passed away. She was only 4 months old. I'll never forget that. So that was traumatic, knowing as an 8-year-old that your mum come running out when your sister had died of what we called cot death. It was a very hot day because back in those days, in the early 90s, you never had the air conditioning you had today. But anyway, I won't talk any more about that. I'll fast track back to where I was. And so I moved to this place out of the city, a smaller city, and it was a very big congregation, but they were nice, but I kind of got lost, and I was working with my uncle at the time, and I stopped going to meetings about 6 months, and this is probably when I look back and I thought I should have shaved a lot of time if I never went back, actually. Anyway, this was in this supermarket one day, or shopping centre, and this got this random call from a guy, older guy that I'd only met. And he had the same name as the guy I'd originally started studying with, older guy. And he was very passionate, and he was had another Bible study, and we could relate to each other, so he invited me around for dinner, and he was kind of like a real father to me, and I'd never met my real father, biological father, so he was kind of like, he filled and we played pool, or what I don't know, in other countries might call it snooker. But we played pool, the 8, and he was very loving and kind and explains the deep things of the scriptures. And looking back, some things didn't really make sense, but still at the time I was only in my early 20s, so I progressed with him. He became a good friend. He's old now, and he's close to 80s now, serious health problems. And I haven't made any recently to contact him since I faded, because I don't think he needs to know. I found that it was a progress to getting baptised, and that I did the questions, in the green book, organised the Jehovah's Will book, and there was an international convention coming up in Sydney, on the other side of Australia, and this is back in 2003. So I was baptised at the international convention. So you could imagine, it's wonderful, looking back on the photos, an international convention, getting baptised, and all the night, about nearly 600 got baptised, and then meeting all the delegates like the Japanese and the Americans from around the world. And I remember some funny things. How I was very clumsy that week. I actually tipped my Coke on American Brother's nice jacket, and I expected him to get angry, but he wasn't. So anyway, so that was great, and we met this American lady, which was she was the only one that could actually take pictures of me getting baptised, because people were quite rude. They were in a big stadium, about which fits ANZ Stadium in Sydney. Anyone that went to that back in 2003 would realise how difficult it was being baptised down on one of those little metal troughs, or you could say whatever it was made of, aluminium. It was, you had to be not like a pool, which would have an assembly hall. You had to be very limited, so you had a lot of people to get baptised. So everyone stood up on the chairs, so that only this American lady could get clear pictures. And that was interesting, because I never had any pictures of me getting baptised until about 8 years after, when I tried to contact this American lady in New York, and I couldn't get the details right. They were of the email, and finally I tried again about 7 years ago, and I got through, and she sent me the pictures. So it was finally great to get the pictures of my baptism after about 8 years after. So one of the strange things, though, was during that period of time, my grandfather went to this international convention as well, and I thought he was one of the first ones to baptise me. This is the one that was a pedophile. And I thought, what are you doing here? And during this period of time after he'd served prison between the year 2000 and the year 2003, he'd got out and been released and actually got baptised again, which I was quite shocked about that. And that could happen. And he came up to him and I found out some certain family members had invited him. So I was annoyed because he was one of the last people I wanted to see. And some things happened. He came to Bethel and I had an argument with my mother over it and some different... I wasn't happy, but I don't want to go into any more detail about that. I'll just fast forward to returning to the congregation I was in. Now, things seemed to progress and make friends, but I never really had any interest of going to Bethel or... I thought of being a missionary. I started to go to the Spanish congregation we had here for some time and made good friends there. And what started to kind of get me was, and probably like a lot of yous actually that do the XJW videos, was tell your testimonies, was the experience of I got harassed at a job because I was a Jehovah's Witness pretty badly, sexually harassed and physically to a degree. And I reported it to my congregation. And by this time, a lot of my friends had moved out and gone to where they were needed more. So the congregation became cold in a sense. Even my counsellor that I seeked help for said to me, why isn't anybody helping you from your church? And so that was really annoying, and it took me a year to trust people in my new job after being harassed like that, which was quite a good job, and was working for the postal service. So what happened was, trying to get this camera angle right, it's ridiculous. On my phone, I have to do a video on my laptop next time. But anyway, so I moved from that congregation to another one, and that's all right. And I noticed too, a lot of people, unless you don't make an effort in the congregations, you've got some good people, and you just get people that just simply don't care. They're there for the status. And if any of you have watched the latest broadcast in April, there was a couple called Stephen and Jay Begg helping in the International Congregation Assembly in Peru. I think it's Peru, yes, or Chile, one of them countries. They were in my congregation, and they were the self-righteous, special pioneers. And typical, a lot of the attitude of some of them was just appalling. It was all about status and climbing the ladder in the organisation, and I didn't like that. Having come from a difficult background, I always thought it's best to be humble like the Bible and Jesus basically preached to, and always put people at ease, be the best person you could, being a people person. And I could never think of thinking myself better than anyone else. I mean, that was a bad attitude to have. Even when preaching, you look back and you think, we went there telling people basically their religion was a load of trash. We have the answer for you. And that was just an arrogant, self-righteous attitude to have. When you look back on the doctrines such as 1914, when the devil was thrown out of the heavens, I mean, how can you prove that? It's just absolute nonsense. And then you've got the shunning policy, which is horrible, especially when you see, if you're a sensitive person to me, to death and seeing people suffer like I am, it really affects you, especially when you see these young people being shunned and committing suicide. It's terrible. So I could never return to a toxic organisation like that. So going back anyway to what happened, I moved on to this new congregation, which is about not far from mine, and started to make new friends and made some good friends there. And then I moved on from there. I don't know what it was. I was on the internet one day, and there was advertising for working holiday visas to go to Canada. And I thought it'd be great to work in another country and experience, so I applied and I was accepted. So I moved from that congregation to another one to save money. It was a big house, and I had 2 dogs and 2 cats and a horse, and I ended up selling them, which I miss to this day. And so I saved quite a lot of money to go to Canada, and was in a congregation. It was a bit difficult because this congregation is a different congregation but the same Kingdom Hall that I was going to recently when I faded. And there was an elder there. He was such a troublemaker, and there's rumours he was sleeping with other men's wives, and it was just, I didn't want to get in. I never even joined the Theocratic Ministry School because I just hated the thought of, people like this making it difficult for other good people. Anyway, fast forward, ended up going to Canada, and I'll skip over my 2-year experience in Canada because, to tell you, that's a video in itself. I know whether it be a short one or a long one, but just the experiences of the witnesses there and working amongst, we call worldly people or non-Jehovah's Witnesses, was an interesting eye-opening itself that helped wake me up. So I return, and I'm in a congregation here, and at that, just before I returned from Canada, my good friend in the Spanish congregation knows that I like Indian women, sisters. So she gave me this email of this Indian girl, and it was a very negative response. The first one I didn't continue to talk to because she was very positive, but I felt uncomfortable because I hadn't met her in person. I thought, what do I want to email a stranger, whether she's enough? So I stopped. But the second one, and the first person ended up being the better person than the second person I'd emailed. And anyway, I ended up returning to Australia and still in contact with this girl, which I had the second Indian woman I had a very witness negative response with. And I was like, why am I even talking to this person? She started texting me every day, and you try not to, but you knew that what your gut feeling said something's not as right, and you let your heart get involved, and you fell in love even though it was long distance. And it was pretty toxic because her mother wanted her to marry an Indian guy, even though she was a Jehovah's Witness. So fast forward, I don't want to go into too much detail because that was heartbreaking. I come back, I left my job and went to meet her, and she was migrating to Canada and help her, and this is about 4 years ago, and it was toxic, and we broke up, and I just felt used. Anyway, there were some good points about this person, so I don't want to talk any more about it. I returned with a broken heart and nearly had a nervous breakdown, I felt, because I really wanted to meet someone. I'm in my mid-30s then, and it would have been nice to have a wife instead of being by yourself. So I come back, and the economy wasn't too good, so I found it difficult to get a job. I worked for a brother for a bit in where my mother lived, and that was quite toxic because my mother's got some problems with my brother, and I won't say anything on a public platform about that. But I moved, and I had help from a Jehovah's Witness aunt that helped me. I stayed with him briefly. And then we moved into I started doing a lot in the ministry. I returned to the area where I'd lived before I left to go to Canada, but I went to a different congregation, and they were very nice. I mean, I don't harbour any animosity towards them. Even when I didn't have a job and was on welfare for briefly a year, they helped me with food even. So I have to take my hat off to them and be thankful that there was a lot of loving people in the Jehovah's Witness organisation. They'd just been brainwashed or used. Anyway, some of these people have got mental issues, and I eventually got a job. So after I moved in and some weird things happened with some witnesses, by the way. I was assaulted by one with a mental issue. The apartment, the house I was renting at the time, he himself, the father, was a child molester in that house. So, I mean, they're everywhere, these pedophiles in this organisation. So anyway, I move out of there. Now I'm sharing with a couple, very nice. They're not really Witnesses are agnostic, and he's a very nice guy. He's into sport and that sort of thing. And I'm actually making this video while they've gone out, and I had these doubts over the years, and I needed them to be validated. Now, the behaviour in the congregation I was taking the group for a time when I wasn't working, and they had a lot of teenagers in the organisation, girls and women, young women. Their attitudes were just appalling, the way they treated each other and the way they acted towards me. And I can understand being teenagers, I thought the hormones, so I make allowance for the immaturity. But some of the self-righteous attitudes and they kind of affected me. And I thought, it was last year that I come across a video. I was looking online, John Cedars, about the convention. And it was actually the segment or the part where woman was going into a cafe, and it was a cafe or somewhere, and they had the gays part. Anyway, I thought, oh, what's this, someone defending the homosexuals now, typical when they leave the organ. Now, I've got my own opinion about certain things, and I don't voice them on online platform. Anyway, but I thought, mate, I watched a bit and I thought, oh, maybe I'm onto something here. And at the time, I just started my new job. So I didn't have a car, or my car had broken down, the one I had, too many problems, so I got rid of it. So I got picked up by a ministerial servant. And this guy used to be a born again and married, and a very nice man. But I thought, oh, this is interesting video, because the points he had, Evans had a lot of good points about the doctrines and about the attitudes people had. And anyway, so I researched more, and I couldn't deny my doubts that this wasn't organisation backed by a God. Whether there's a God, this is not backed by a God, this organisation. So what it really, and I tell you, the waking up last April was very difficult. I know a lot of you put videos on here that you woke up 6 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. But when you're woken up just a year, it's pretty hard. And when you don't have a wife or a companion to talk to, it's not easy. Sometimes I was a bit envious when Lloyd first, I thought, well, at least you got a wife, Lloyd. Or at least you stopped the Shannon girl birth, got a husband out of it, and you both left. You don't understand leaving by yourself. And anyway, but I won't take any credit away from that. It's good that people do have, they're married and they got their family out, which was good. But I'll say just those judicial committees like Stop the Struggle video, that was a real eye-opener, the way he was treated. And since then, I've watched many others. There's probably many of you in America, UK, testimonies I've watched, especially books I've read, The Iraq and Apostate, and Escaping the Jehovah's Witnesses by Lloyd Evans. And it is right, I agree, Lloyd, not everything, your viewpoints I don't agree with on some things, your new beliefs. I've got to admit I don't agree with everything, but we're all entitled to believe what we want. But I don't agree with shunning policy. I don't agree with cutting people off, obviously, which is from their family, and the doctrine. It just doesn't make any sense, the anointed nonsense. And the way that people explained it, and just the material that provided their own Watchtower's publication was just this new light. Is God schizophrenic that he changes his mind so much that oh no, that was wrong? Why would a perfect God even give him false information? And for a lot of yous that may have left recently in the last 6 months, Crisis of Conscience is a brilliant book, my sisters. That was just a real eye. As much as I appreciate the books of Lloyd's, and that was the nail in the coffin, that book. Just someone and what he went through. And I'm 37 now. I don't want to be 50, 60 and missed out on having a chance to have my own family and kids and so forth. So what got me was when I seen this material, I just slowly stopped going to meetings. I faded and I thought, I'm not giving them the benefit inviting me to judicial committee. And I did have, prior to leaving, I did have an experience in the back room of an elder got annoyed with me because I wouldn't reach out to become an elder. And I said, I don't want to pry in people's business, especially if people have been disfellowshipped for something that they shouldn't have. And I never really agreed with mistreating people that way. And I also thought talking to different people that go to different churches, how they were dumbfounded the way witnesses behave. Mormons are the same, Brethren, Scientologists, they're all toxic, controlling religions. And also other things that woke me up was the governing body's attitudes. I mean, especially you would have seen lately old Tony Morris, the McCullen alcoholic video. I mean, it's just disgusting, really. I mean, how they take advantage of people and the organ, how a lot of older people have wasted their whole life in this and are struggling financially because of it. So anyway, I started to fade and I just stopped going. My sisters were having a Bible study and I said, stop. So that's one thing I've got to be thankful for. I still have my family, my immediate family. My mum still talks to me, my brothers. They were never baptised. Only me and my immediate family was baptised. My sisters agreed and they said they noticed a couple of things of my sisters was the pressure to try and, she was told to marry her boyfriend and her other sister once she got baptised she could never associate with again because she wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. So she was disgusted about that and stopped too. And which is very stressful because Mum used to preach a lot to my sisters and they still fear sometimes Armageddon and, you know, now their whole belief system is basically, what do you believe now? And all I can say to people waking up is you don't have to believe in certain things. You don't have to go and adopt the belief in evolution or creation. Make up your own mind. I mean, you know, maybe there is a God. And just think that, well, at least you can live the best life you can and be a real good person to help people where you can. And especially a lot of people I can say that need help one's leaving. And one of the things too that really bothered me was the disgusting attitude was a pioneer brother. Just before I left, he had this Bible study that had terminal cancer. Now, this guy eventually died, but because he never stopped smoking prior to leaving, that he was criticising this guy was dying. I mean, and then this young teenager in the congregation that doesn't believe the organisation, but he's stuck, he was mocking him, this pioneer. And I thought, this is disgusting. Jesus and God, if there were that portray themselves as loving, wouldn't agree with this. So that really woke me up. And if you're a sensitive person, I mean, it's not easy. Since I've left, I did a lot of research, but I've read both Lloyd Evans' books. I've read, I think it's Michael, the guy from Ireland. I've read his book, 2 books. I mean, that was a very eye-opener what he went through. And it is very true, I must say. We are basically, once we come back out in the real world, I've had experience in the real world where I had friends growing up that weren't, but like you that have grown up completely in their organisation, it's a whole total different ball game. I mean, yeah, trying to develop friendships. And I mean, I've been to a few things on Meetup trying to establish new friends, and it's not easy. A lot of people out there are shallow and haven't really experienced anything too difficult, and you can't relate to them. And I'm finding it, and I've been to a few speed dating to try and meet women, and I've spent quite a bit of money on online dating, and I can tell you, give you advice if you're looking in, you're a younger person, don't waste your time with online dating. When it worked for my housemate, he met a nice girl on Tinder, but he was fortunate. I mean, I wouldn't waste my time with online dating. It can be just really affect your self-esteem. So I wouldn't say it's worth pursuing that avenue to look for some. Try and develop yourself. Seek help as a psychologist. With a psychologist, and you've got to change all that belief system. And it can be heartbreaking, I must admit. It's not easy. I mean, changing your whole belief. I fear getting old now. I mean, I didn't want to get old. I used to joke with my mother and think, well, I'd rather die at 40. Shoot me if I get to 40 and the end hasn't come. Because I don't want to get old. I mean, but we don't really know what the future does hold. So I keep an open mind there, but I have goals for the future. I really want to meet a nice woman, further my education. I never end up going to university. So whether I do go to university or use another institution to study similar to get the job I want to get. I also would say enjoy life. Like, I've travelled quite a bit. Don't be too hard on yourself. I mean, if you're not making friends, try and grieve in a sense inside, because it's like you had your right arm cut off. You've had all these beliefs, especially for yous that are raised in it and never had any interaction outside the religion. I've watched a lot of you, without mentioning all the names, I've watched a lot of your testimonies and probably most that I've seen on there, and I have to say the information you provide and the experiences of elders and young people, it's very good to see that you're continuing on in life, and those that have lost loved ones due to horrific shunning and have committed suicide, all I can say is it must be terrible, but you have to continue on in life and try and just remember the good things. We don't know what the future holds, for when it comes to if there's an afterlife or what, but all we can do in this life, and I must say, even you older people, you can get out there and still have a life. I mean, I'm 37 now. I left last year when I was 36. And I mean, it's not easy, like I said, trying to make new friends, try and work on yourself first. I mean, do hobbies, and at the moment, I love sport, I love comedy, I love music. I've been to lots of concerts recently in the last 6 months. Passions. Try and focus on yourself, and you'll meet people. Do things where you can really make friendships. Like, I've joined kayaking groups, mountain biking groups, language groups to meet people. I like Bollywood dancing and foreign movies. Maybe help people in the community that way. If you're now you're not a witness, volunteer. I've done that, and it's very rewarding. I mean, you learn a lot from older people that may have fought in the wars, or they give you some sound advice. And I can say, when you're dating, if you do meet someone, have a standard where that person, even though you're outside the organisation, you still learn a lot in a good way. You will taught good morals from the organisation, take the good you can from it, how to interact with people. And one experience I'll tell you was when I went to a concert. I was flying to Melbourne in December it was, to go and see Bon Jovi concert, and a psychologist said to me, I told her my experience, and she was from South Africa, so she experienced the apartheid. And she said as a child she used to hide under the bed when they were, obviously, I don't want to go into too much detail, beating up the black people. And she said it was quite disgusting, and it traumatised her as a child. And she was a psychologist now, and I told her my experience as a Jehovah's Witness and how they treat people that leave. And she said don't allow it to affect you negatively. All you can do is use it to help people in a positive way. And she said to me, you're very good at recognising people that may be suffering from mental issues, so you should perhaps become a counsellor or a psychologist. Do something to help people to recover that way if you get satisfaction and enjoyment out of helping people that way. So I kind of took from that, and it's not easy. I mean, like, I'd like to have a girlfriend or some good friends right now. Have a public holiday to go and do things with, but unfortunately that hasn't come yet. But if I keep developing myself and seeking help where I need to, which is also you need to eat well. I mean, don't lock yourself away in a bedroom. If you are just left and suffering, I can give you advice. Go for a walk in a nice park or in the sunshine. And in those people in the northern hemisphere, that obviously you got more colder months than warmer months, take advantage of it now. Must be coming up to your warmer months now. Enjoy yourself. Don't feel obligated to meet a girl or something straight away. And if you're young, in your 20s, or all I can say to you, take advantage of it now. If you've got doubts, leave. A lot of the people are left are sensible, loving people that will be there to help you when you leave. They're not some raving lunatic apostate that is just out to bitterly oppose Jehovah's Witnesses and make life difficult for them, or different groups like Mormons and Scientologists. And I must admit, if you watch movies like Apostasy and Confessions of a Teenage Jerk, they're great movies to show how witnesses behave. And also do your research on the doctrines, and it'll give you soundness of mind. It'll put you at ease. And when you're younger too, try and don't do anything stupid and get involved in drugs and alcohol to try and numb the pain. It won't. Face it head on and go and see a psychologist or join groups similar where you can heal. Talk to people. I mean, there's many people, and that's what I admire about the people that have left. They're willing to listen to people all hours. I mean, they might be suffering, how to help you. For instance, when you have there might be some teenagers out there, and if there's anyone in Australia, I mean, we don't really know anyone in Western Australia that's actually doing too much, but I know for a fact in Sydney, I think it's Paul Bundy, provided a website as a platform, so JW Facts, JW Survey, and also watching John Cedar's channel, Stop the Shunning, Ex Fifth, I mean, Mike and Kim, which I found a little bit weird at first because I thought, oh, they seems like rednecks from southern USA. The way they behaved and talk, I found them actually irritating at first. But then I realised they were just portraying the humour and the stupidity of the organisation. So now, having been out a year, I can tolerate watching their videos. So different people you can relate to more. Maybe people that are a little bit extreme. Like, I don't agree with Kingdom Hall Crash. If you want to do that, and it may help some, that's your choice for those that do it. But I have to say I'm with Lloyd Evans and others on this. That is not the way to go. If you did that when I was going to the meeting or approached me on the cart, I probably would have thought you're an idiot and lunatic and just wouldn't have listened. So I don't think that's the right way to go. And try and think of many people you can help that may have had doubts without thinking of being self-centred. Like those people running into the kingdom or the bitter, yes, they may have lost, but bitterness is not going to get you anywhere. I mean, it's going to ruin your life and stop you from progressing and having a happy, fulfilling life in your future. Whether you join another church like some have, I don't think I could at the moment, and if I did go along, I wouldn't be a regular member just to experience, but try and accept that everyone's got different beliefs now. And, I know there's some that I still find strange, certain beliefs with ideas about going into it that others have adopted, but that's my choice. That's their choice to believe what they want. But at the same time, I think that it's there's a lot of negativity, yes, in the world, and suffering, how the witnesses portray, but there's a lot of goodness too. And we've seen it with, when you talk about science and so forth, there's a lot of advancements. And in a country like Australia, we're known as a lucky country. I mean, having worked in Canada and see what people do, how they struggle with the weather and the low wage, I must admit we're very fortunate down here. And you have to say that experiences I've learnt with people, non-JW and Jehovah's Witnesses, have helped me to define myself. But if you're like me and many others that have left that don't tolerate hypocrisy or being taken as a fool, then by all means, I mean, take the opportunity to do your research. And research is your path to freedom. I'd have to say that, mentally, because if you independently can decide for yourself, and whether we were created by God or whatever, we're being given our own brain. Use that to decide, and your gut instinct usually tells you if something's not right, it's usually right. And you'll find the real answers. The advancement of technology such as the internet is a saviour in a lot of ways, because it helps us see the irony and the stupidity of these organisations that actually rob of a lot of good people of their whole lives. And I can say, I've nearly gone an hour, but all I can say now is I provide some advice for young people that are leaving. You know, my name is, you'll see on the website, I live near, just south of Perth, Western Australia. If you need any help or advice or resources to leave the organisation, I mean, if you're in difficult circumstances, if I can just be a listening ear, please let me know in the comments. I mean, I do have an email which I can be contacted on, which is snagga344@gmail.com, and that's snagga@gmail. snagga344@gmail.com. And please, if any of yous are watching it that are current elders trying to expose people for judicial committees, don't waste your time with me. I ain't going to answer my door, and I'm not going to come back to any kingdom, or we're finished with that. And I think it's disgusting what people are going through, and labelling people as an apostate is not good, because people are not apostates. It's just that people don't like it, some people in the organisation, because they're stuck there, their whole family, and they're afraid that this is not the truth. They're afraid to face the facts, that I've wasted a lot of my life. And if you're like me and the others that have left, you think, oh, I don't want to be taken for a fool. And we're not some crazy, deluded idiots like the governing body are, that provide no relevant answers to some serious questions. I mean, even when we went to the door, we were taught, if you don't know, get the reasoning book. When you look back on it, like my sister said, was if you've got to go back and you don't have the answers, why dance around the question? Should have the answer there and there if you're the truth. And that's the problem, was they don't. It's just all the pointless information that the writing committee and these branches make up. And it's quite appalling how people believe this. I mean, and it really is. They really, what would you say, hijack your mind in a sense. Mind control, fear-mongering to keep people in line. So anyone struggling within my area, Western Australia, that needs help, I'd say, I'm willing to talk to you. So even if you reach out to me on my YouTube channel, and I can provide help in a way, even if it's a listening ear, or if you're deciding to leave, and the best way to. I mean, whatever you do, don't give them the benefit of disfellowshipping you. Just fade. I mean, just slowly go. And if you're, I'd say, a teenager in your later years and you can't leave yet, just do what you can till you leave. Maybe reach out to different ones, listen to videos until you're old enough. There'll be a growing platform of amount of people that can help and do care. We just don't want to come on here and tell our testimonies for attention to people or how many. We want to really help people. And that's the whole point of the main activists out there, is to help people realise that these kind of religions are toxic. And having spoken to different people in different churches, they're a bit dumbfounded the behaviour of the way high control groups operate today. So try and focus on yourself if you're suffering and take time out. Don't be hard on yourself to try and make friends straight away. I noticed one woman in America, she said that left. It took her 2 years to make regular friends. And it's not easy, and try not to be, remember people believe different things, but try not to, you got to still meet people that you can relate to, like things you do. I mean, and because try and find where where you belong, because it's not easy. And like for myself, I find that sleeping, it's still not knowing what to do at times and being frustrated with myself through wasting many years and this sort. But then I thought I'm still young enough to achieve a lot. I've still been able to go to sporting events, concerts, met some interesting, and I admire many people. I mean, I don't just listen to people's podcasts that have left for the sake of it and for, oh, well, that one's over, that one's, and forget about it. I'll try and really absorb what they've learnt and their good experiences as for advice, how to cope when you've left. And that's probably why 6 months ago I couldn't make a video, because it was just... And I just want to say, whatever you do, if you're not in a position to leave, you're not obligated to confess anything to organisation. So, or any relatives. So I'm going to leave it there because I think it's nearly an hour. So thanks for listening. If you want to know more about my experiences too, I can tell, just subscribe, and I'm willing to hear your life experiences in the comments. Thank you from down under. Take care.